reasons that the gas prices were low while Trump was in office is because he opened up the reserves. And as soon as Biden took office, he shut that down.
Hey, man. So, yeah, that is a very common misconception here in the United States. And you may not know who I am, but I go by Mr. Global on here. I'm a globally recognized oil and gas expert, and I'm also the vice president and principal partner in an oil company. And before I made this video, I watched some of your content to get a feel for who you are. And it turns out, like me, you're an independent, which I do appreciate independence. So just so you know, this isn't political for me. I don't care about the politics. I just care about what happened. So let's go through a history of the gas prices and kind of show you the groundwork that was laid and everything and how it all unfolded. So during the Obama administration, we went through what is known as the shale revolution. You may know what that is, but basically what that means, here's historical oil production numbers. During the 8 years that Obama was in office, we basically doubled production of oil in the United States. And during most of that time, OPEC maintained their production. And then it simply got to a point where our production got so high that OPEC was losing market share. So OPEC began increasing production to flood the market, sink oil prices, crash the global oil market, and try to put U.S. producers out of business. And when they did so, the crash that occurred in 2014, 15, and 16 was the largest oil crash in U.S. history. Throughout all those years that the United States was increasing production, OPEC was producing right at 34 million barrels a day of oil. They got tired of that. So in 2015, they produced over 36 million. An extra 2 million barrels a day on a global market is a lot. In 2016, they produced 37.5 million, only furthering the oil crash and making it even worse. By the end of 2016, there was so much oil in storage around the world, it was going to take years and years to get rid of that extra supply. There was tankers of oil all over the world, parked offshore full of oil because all of the storage tanks onshore were completely full. So when Donald Trump took office, gas was averaging like $2.38 a gallon on a national average. So he inherited very low gas prices. And in 2017, in Donald Trump's first year, OPEC continued pumping record amounts of oil. That was keeping our gas prices low. Donald Trump didn't open the reserves. A president opening the reserves is not a thing unless you sell oil out of the strategic reserve like Joe Biden did in 2022. Donald Trump never did that. He didn't open any reserves. That's not a thing. In 2018, OPEC producing just under still 37 million barrels of oil a day. But the U.S. began increasing production again after the big crash in 15 and 16. And in 2018, we were up to 10 million barrels a day. Why were we increasing production? Because we had a large backlog of DUCs. DUCs are wells that are drilled but uncompleted. They've been drilled, they've been sitting there forever waiting to be completed, and it's a good time to complete wells when the cost of oil is low, because service companies will work a lot cheaper because there's less work to be done, so they're bidding their work much cheaper. So a lot of companies opted to go ahead and start completing wells that were uncompleted because they could do it much cheaper. And they didn't even have to produce the wells if they didn't want to. It was just an opportunity for them to save 25% on their well cost. So under Obama, we pretty much doubled oil production, and under Trump, we increased it by about a third. But what happened when Joe Biden took office? When Joe Biden took office, we didn't do anything but continue increasing oil production. He didn't shut down anything Trump had done. We have one drop in production in the month after Joe Biden took office. That is from the massive ice storm that hit the state of Texas and all the wells were shut in. That had nothing to do with policy. As you can see, Oil production dropped, but the next month it was even higher than it was when he took office. And every month after that, it continued to increase. Biden did issue his pause on drilling permits on federal lands, but that's not anything that would impact production for years down the road. Drilling permits had been acquired, beforehand and are good for years. So a pause on drilling permits does not slow down drilling activity for several years. So nothing Biden did slowed oil production. What happened in 2021 was this. OPEC was producing 31.7 million barrels a day instead of 37 million barrels a day. That's what happened in 2021. This was due to Donald Trump's deal with OPEC, the OPEC 2020 deal, to cut production drastically for 2 years because of COVID. The problem is COVID didn't last 2 years. No, it didn't. So by 2022, OPEC produced an average of 34 million barrels a day, still 3 million barrels a day less than they were producing under Donald Trump. And the United States was producing more. 2022 was the second highest production year in history for the United States. The only reason OPEC achieved 34 million barrels a day in 2022 is because the OPEC 2020 deal ended on May 1st of 2022. And they started increasing production ever so slightly. But they did get up to 34 million barrels a day. Well, by the end of 2021, the demand for oil and gas had come back to pre-pandemic levels. And OPEC was only producing 31.5 million barrels a day. They were producing 6 million barrels a day less than they were before the pandemic. That's why gas prices were so high. In 2022, OPEC was producing over 3 million barrels a day less than they were pre-pandemic. That's why gas prices were so high. And now the United States is producing more oil and gas than it has ever produced in history. And OPEC is still at or below 34 million barrels a day. They have never restored production. And that's why, even though our gas prices are lower, they're still hanging in there on kind of the higher end. Another problem we have is the refining capacity we lost between 2016 and 2020. We've lost 1 million barrels a day of refining capacity. That means we don't have the ability to make as much gasoline as we used to. It keeps the market a little bit undersupplied and gas prices stay high. It is true that Joe Biden is no friend of the oil and gas industry. That is obvious. But what is also true is that not a single thing he has tried to do to the industry has had any success at all. It just appears as though it has because of OPEC. We are producing a record amount of oil and gas, but the world is also using a record amount of oil and gas. So if we're being honest, neither one of these presidents was very friendly to the oil and gas industry. And I know Donald Trump likes to claim he was, but the fact is he wasn't. The only thing Donald Trump did that was good for the oil and gas industry was very harmful to consumers. That's the OPEC 2020 deal. That's why we ended up with $5 gas in 2022. Thanks.